But because he offers us free will, we are given the opportunity to make both right and wrong decisions, and then course correct when needed, all the while gaining and I guess experiencing learning throughout life's journey. So at the end of the day, God has high hopes for us all, and we just need a little bit of faith to hopefully realize his full plan for us in our lives. But before we kind of jump directly into the steps, I wanted to kind of talk about the two different types of systems or systems of thinking that helps us in making our decisions. The first is there's more like big life-altering decisions, moving countries, picking a partner, picking a degree, moving roles or job roles. And then of course, is the small decisions that we make, thousands, not yet, almost. The smaller decisions that we make, which are very much around, do I want a cappuccino or do I want a latte? Should I switch off the light before I leave the house? Do I want a chicken wrap or a tuna wrap for lunch? Things like that. So it's very much, obviously, I hope based on that alone, you can see maybe the level of effort should differ between those smaller decisions and then those bigger decisions. So this concept itself can be better explained in a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. So the book's by Daniel Kahneman, and it talks about having two thinking systems. System one is known as that fast thinking. So it's very much, there's no sense of voluntary control. You kind of just make an automatic decision. It's probably based on your intuition and your gut, and you kind of just move quickly through making these decisions. The other is slow thinking, as it says there. This, as it's defined, is very much about allocating attention to the effortful mental activity that it demands. In other words, said simply, it is more for those decisions that require thought and require maybe a bit of research gathering before actually making the decision. So put your hand up. We all gravitate towards a certain system. Put your hand up if you normally gravitate towards more system one, act on impulse, make decisions quite quickly, and without kind of stewing on it, or at least regretting the decision. Yeah, so I'm probably more there as well. I like to just kind of keep a bit fast pace. And then who here, I'm assuming if you didn't put your hand up, you're all more system two, so more slow thinking, right? There's nothing wrong with that. We're going to be talking a lot about slow thinking. It's actually very necessary to actually get to making an informed decision. But this is where maybe, if you can relate to this, you'll consider all the colour options before buying the paint that you want for the house, or your family home. Or you might look on all the websites, find where the cheapest Jordans, maybe a bad example, are, and then go into that website or that outlet and then buy it from there. So, or maybe even apply for 2 jobs at once just to keep your options open, right? So what's important to note that before we kind of jump in, it's important that, before we jump into the key steps, that for effective decision making to be realized, we're going to have to need to flex our, the style that we gravitate to with, sorry, I've lost my line here, yeah. Is to sometimes know you need to flex a little with your comfortable thinking style, depending on the decision that you need to make. Why? Because not all decisions can, fast and slow system thinking, is that sometimes it's really important that we don't sweat the small stuff. If it's, some things we need to have some brain capacity to handle the more difficult decisions that we need to make. So there's a concept called analysis paralysis. And simply put, it just means where we invest so much mental energy potentially overthinking a situation, or you've gone ahead and gathered all this information, and honestly, you still don't know how to make the decision. It's paralysis. You're literally not moving. So make sure that you are consciously thinking about what things in life, based on my decisions that I have to make, that I can make quicker than others, and make sure you leave the right amount of time to talk about those more, the bigger decisions that you have to make in life. So, exercise actually working through them, and actually learnt a lot along the way. So hopefully you guys can pick up a thing or two in these steps. So the first step is pray for guidance. So here, the first question that we're actually wanting to ask is, what does God want? How many of us, it's kind of like, not what I want, how many of us kind of want to creep in and go, something's presented to you, and you go, oh yeah, I really want that, that's it, I'm going to go for it. Don't worry, you wouldn't do that now, hopefully after we've gone through the 6 steps. You also don't want to make a decision based on what's easy, or not what's going to make you successful in your own eyes. That's our starting point. You don't make a decision, especially if it's a critical one in your life, without first seeing if it is what God wants in your life. So, practically speaking, what does this mean? The language of your prayer during this first step is very much, you kind of don't want to say things like, God, this is what I want, confirm this is part of your will. Or, God, I know that I just interviewed for 2 different jobs, one at Google and one at, give me another company, anything, Coca-Cola, right? Sure, please, Lord, that it is part of your plan for my life. But make sure also it's something that I'll be able to use for good, with you and for you, as I continue to grow and serve with Christ. So for example, and I use the job example again, it's the most common for us all. Is this the right job for me to take? Will I be able to learn from the experience if I took this job? Will it take away from my service? Will I be able to give back? These are the type of questions that you want to kind of do an initial dig, just to kind of get a sense of what God maybe wants at this stage. So I hope that kind of makes sense so far in terms of the first. So it's just a pause. Call it like a deep breath. Before you act on any sort of impulse, just pause, pray for guidance, and the critical question in step 1 is ask, what does God want? Okay? So then, I realised I didn't do my thing again. So, yeah, it's okay. It's just a summary of what I said. So naturally, the next step is gathering of facts. Get the facts. And here, for the logical and analytical people in the room, you probably love this step because, it's time you actually do some analysis and research. Get the data, right, before you make your decision. The important thing to note here is that we actually don't base our decisions on a feeling or an emotion, or something that you think you want. I think it's a misconception that we all probably fall into. It's important, if it is important to you, you do your research, you gather the information to help you make your decision. Some people might say then, well, where does prayer and faith come into this? If it's all about just the data collection and like being able to make a very logical decision. So faith is not against doing your homework. God gave us 2 arms, 2 legs, and a heartbeat. He wants us to use them, and including our mind. And we read in Proverbs 3:16, every prudent man acts with knowledge. And something that we hope that we as a congregation and as a community here never experience is what we read in Hosea 4:6, which says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So it's very obvious that the important thing here is that we don't make decisions without having the right level of knowledge. And it shouldn't be based on nothing. We've got to have something to back up our decision. So your role in this step is to collect some pertinent information before making your decision. What information is needed? Do a bit of an assessment. How am I going to get that information? Is it internal? Do I maybe need to do a bit of internal reflection and work to actually see if it is something that I might want to do, drawing up the pros and the cons of the situation? Asking yourself the 5 whys, like why do I actually want this position if we follow that example? Obviously guys, the best part, throughout this talk, think of your own personal examples that you got going on at the moment as we work through it. I'm just using the job one because it's the easiest one to kind of follow through. So when you've kind of got to your 5 whys and whatnot, other things you'll find online, research from other people, from their experiences, etc. But too many of us make decisions without actually gathering the facts. It looks like that shiny new toy. It looks really glamorous, and it's something we want to chase. But actually, in fact, it can mess us up down the road if we sign up to something that actually we really didn't want in the end. God forbid it's like a financial commitment that you've got to then make up for, right? In Proverbs 18, verse 3, we see, he who answers a matter before he hears it is folly and shame on him. So Proverbs, the book of wisdom, is making it very clear so far, gain your knowledge before you do anything, right? So the alarming stat is that 90% of new businesses fail in their first year. 90%. Like, it's ridiculously high. But why do we think that is? And why is it relevant to right now? Do we think that it's because the staff didn't really work hard enough in the business in that first year, or that people were really lazy, or that people actually didn't have good ideas based on the business that they were starting? The answer is probably not. It maybe could be that they didn't do enough of the research gathering and evidence and gathering that information before they opened. Enthusiasm alone is not enough to actually carry you through. So passion and enthusiasm is fantastic, but if you can't back it up, sometimes we may fall short. And that stat is really quite alarming. So we've gathered the facts. We've prayed for guidance. We've started gathering the facts, internal, external. We've started asking ourselves, where do we think we are? We've done the research. We know a little bit more about the company and their history or whatever. So then we move on to step 3, which is ask for advice. This step is, I think for many in the room, will probably be the most uncomfortable. I'll explain why. The Bible is actually really big on asking for advice and receiving counsel in making decisions. It says here in Proverbs 24:6, "By wise counsel you will wage your own war, and in a multitude of counselors there is safety." So with this one, why is there safety in a multitude of counselors? Who knows Henry Ford? We all heard of Henry Ford before? So yeah, he's also the one that started, thank you very much, the 9-to-5 workday many years ago. I didn't actually know that till recently. But he also said, he was once asked, how do you become successful? It's a pretty broad statement, big question. He answered, by making wise decisions. So then naturally the next question is, well, how do you make wise decisions? He said, from experience. And he said, well, and then the question asked was, how do you gain experience? Anyone guess his answer? Yeah. He actually said it's making the wrong decisions, which then made him wise because he learnt. So wisdom, he says, comes from experience. And experience, he says, comes from mistakes. So the next part is interesting. And, I do agree to a point. We need to make mistakes in life to kind of help us learn. Have you heard that before? Make your own decisions and you have to learn from your mistake. Yeah, we've heard that from mum and dad lots of times. However, where we should exercise caution is in thinking that you need to make all your mistakes on your own and by yourself before you learn, if you know what I mean. Wouldn't it be great if we could actually learn from our own, not only learn from our own mistakes, but from the mistakes of others? How often now, in today's time, have I said things like, oh my God, I wish I told my 18-year-old self, blah. I wish I knew that back then. Why did I have to go through that experience to then get that learning? So the point that the Bible's making in Proverbs there is that life is sometimes too short to have everything based on trial and error. We don't have a lot of, we've only got finite years in life. And I hope it's a bit of a humbling experience as well, right? All we need to do is to tap into the wise people that God has put around us and to ask for advice when it's necessary. So, hey, I'm thinking of going into this. Got any learnings, watch outs for me? Something really simple. Might save you a lot of heartache later. So it says here in Proverbs 20:18, plans are established by seeking advice. So if you wage war, obtain guidance. But the problem here in this verse is that some of us are actually good at asking for advice. The rest of us, and I'm sorry boys, it is statistically proven that men aren't as good as asking for advice. It's, I got it, I'm all good. And us too, and us girls as well. So how many, and let's be honest with ourselves, how many of us aren't inclined to ask for advice even though we know it will probably be good for us? Sometimes the truth hurts a little bit and we don't necessarily want to challenge the status quo or be wronged or get given a piece of advice that, yes, is probably right, but we don't necessarily want to action. So the interesting thing here is that we then face the challenge of appearing wise or actually being wise. The wisdom actually came from asking. The wisdom, like appearing wise, is almost like it's airy-fairy. It's nothing. It means nothing. So, and with this in mind, the key question in step 3, in the ask for advice step, is, can you help me? We've got to get better at asking for help and asking for advice, and not let our own pride get in the way. So in the book of Proverbs as well, it says, it's very direct, probably one of the, I made sure this was the New King James Version as well, like just to make sure it didn't have like a different translation. No, this is legit in the New King James Version. Proverbs 12 verse 1, it says, whoever loves instruction loves knowledge, but he who hates correction is stupid. I'm pretty sure that's probably one of the most clear verses we've got in the Bible for us. So again, whoever loves instruction loves knowledge, but he who hates correction is stupid. So we've got to learn to ask for advice, yo lad. Let's really get better at doing it. And my Arabic's terrible. So moving on to step 4. We're almost there. So this step is the most time-consuming, because I reckon everyone's mind gets caught in this step. It's calculating the costs, weighing up the evidence of all the information that you've just gathered, right? Hands up, I personally hate this step. I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. I've probably got too much information, and I'm probably going more towards that analysis paralysis kind of thinking. But so we know here in this step that we have enough information to support the decision. But we also need to know that there is a cost of the decision that we're going to make. I'll expand a little bit on this. The only thing that you lose in making decisions is time. And it's something that you might not necessarily get back, or you don't get time back. So for every decision you make, you've got to weigh up that cost. And we read in Proverbs 20:25, it is a trap to dedicate something rashly and only later to consider one's vows. So for this step, it's very important to draw on the information and combine that with the emotions to imagine what it would be like if you actually carried out these options, these scenarios that you might have, the 2 jobs you're juggling, I don't know, it could be like the partner or the person that you're kind of courting at the moment, whatever the situation is at the time. You've got to really evaluate whether the need, the decision, or the goal that you kind of set, like, God, what is it that you want for me? If it actually meets evaluate whether the need identified in step 2 would be met or resolved through the use of each of these kind of the information that you've gathered and the support that you've gotten so far. So you'll actually, through that process, you'll notice you'll start to favour certain directions. And with that in mind, you'll probably feel like you might be able to reach the goal that you have in mind by making that decision. So then what you would do is you would then put them in order, top to bottom, and from there be able to make your decision based on your own value system. So it's the question that you then need to ask yourself in this step is, what is it worth? And a successful person once said there are 2 keys to success. One is to decide what you want. I think we've gone through that. We know it's very easy to know what you want, really, in principle. But then decide how much you are willing to pay for it. And point 2, that point, how much you're willing to pay for it, is kind of what this step's all about. It's actually unpacking and weighing up the cost of the option, or the decision that you're about to make. And that's hard. That's really hard to do. So right now, we're at that point where we kind of have an idea of the direction that we want to take. We've got the information to help us. We kind of have started asking ourselves, right, what's it worth to me? Is it something that I'm willing to lose time for? Like, it's a big question. You know, like, have you ever heard someone say, oh, I wish I didn't lose those 2 years doing that? Things like that. Are you ready to take that step? And I think when you really honestly ask yourself that question, you start to cross out a lot of the options and you got your top 3 and then you work on it. So you're pretty much now ready to make the decision. You've jumped in. So the next thing we do is step 5, and that is prepare for problems. Hands up here if you believe the statement that anything good in life comes problem-free. Yeah, exactly. Correct answer. It doesn't. In Proverbs 22:3, it says, "The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty." So the key to this step is, we all know Murphy's Law here, or even if you didn't do science, hopefully, it's like, Murphy's Law is essentially, if something will go wrong, if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. The thing we need to remember here is that in this case, we're actually striving to make that decision that is good for us. But we also need to expect and prepare for the worst. I wish someone also told me this way back when, right? It's all around asking yourself, or getting us comfortable in asking ourselves, what could go wrong? And what am I going to do if it does go wrong? So you've kind of like, you don't know, I don't know if it's clear yet, but you don't know the answer to that question. But you've acknowledged that something could go wrong. I think that's wisdom in itself. And, you know, we're literally just preparing for it. So with that in mind, you ask yourself this question and prepare for the problems. You just make sure that you don't make this mistake trying to do both of these things. Thinking that there is a difference between preparing for problems and solving your problems. Preparing for some problems is what we're doing here, where solving is not for now. Like, how many of us, you know, we don't know what's going to come up. We're expecting it, but you're not supposed to have the answer before you even start. That's part of the learning and the experience, etc., right? So what I mean by that is, you don't have to solve all your problems before going forward with God's plan, because at this point you've prayed, you've assessed, you've calculated, you've kind of gotten advice where you need. You're in a pretty good place, and it feels like it's part of God's plan. You just need to prepare for it. So take Mother Teresa as an example here. She knew when she decided to live the life that she did, and to serve in the way that she did, that she would encounter problems. She didn't have the solution. She knew she was going to just face many a problem, but she was prepared for what was going to come her way. Another example is, remember the story of the man, when the man came to Jesus and that man's son was sick. And he said, "Jesus, can you please heal my son?" Jesus responded by saying, "Do you believe? As all things are possible to those who believe." The man responded saying, "I believe, but help my unbelief." And this, "I believe, but help my unbelief." Jesus actually said to that, pretty much, paraphrased, "Good enough." The man was saying, "I believe," but he didn't really know what he's believing, or really know how to believe, but he had the faith to actually believe that Christ could heal his son. So as long as you know that there is, you know, a faith component, but don't really understand how it's going to come to life, Jesus actually says, "Good." And that is what Jesus wants from us in this step. Lord, if this is what you want for me in my life, but there's going to be all of these challenges, Jesus asks us essentially to bring them to him. So it's not always easy doing this, and a lot of us struggle with trusting the Lord with our problems, because that's essentially what we're doing here, right? If that's where you fall short, then it's the 6th step that we're about to cover off on, where we need to really take action and move to the next step, which is, I did it again, keep forgetting to move the slides. The next step is facing your fears. Because when we really struggle to trust God, what is it that's actually getting in the way? Take a guess. It's in the name of the 6th step. It's fear, exactly. Fear of what? Fear is actually what stops us, fear is actually what stops more of God's dream from taking place than anything else. Fear of failure, fear of embarrassment, fear of discomfort or pain or inconvenience. But we don't like to admit it, but at the root, while you're kind of sitting on the pews here, kind of staring up at what God's dream that He has for you, and then refusing to take that step. It's fear. It is fear. It's a fear. Sometimes it's also like the fear of starting and not being able to finish. So therefore, I won't start to begin with because it's easier. How many of us fall into that? We know it's going to be challenging. We know that we've just gone through this. We've assessed, we've got the information, we've asked for advice, we've calculated the costs. But even then, we probably aren't going to be able to finish it. So therefore, I shouldn't even start to begin with. We can't let this fear paralyze us. So it says in Ecclesiastes 11:4, this is a pretty heavy verse. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. I'll read it again. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. In a nutshell, what this is saying is, the person that's sitting and waiting for the perfect condition is never going to sow anything. So there will always be this element of, we're not sure if it is really the right thing to do. There will always be this element of faith in our decision making. But that's why this step's really uncomfortable, because it's the part that we feel the least in control of. It's the faith element, it's the faith component. So anytime God has done anything great in the world, it's actually by using the average person, truly. Regardless of who you are, where you've been, how old you are, none of it matters. God actually has for us, guys, a special purpose, dream, plan for our life. And you know what? We've talked about it a little bit, but you know what fixes fear? It's faith. So therefore, the question we must ask ourselves in step number 6, the final step, is, where is my faith? And in Romans 8:31, it says, if God is for us, we've heard it in a hymn, if God is for us, who can be against us? That's the true comfort verse right there. Anytime we feel that weight of that last step and with the weight of the decision, the odds, the problems, you should just recite Romans 8:31. If God is for us, who could be against us? So, kind of there, but I wanted to let's just pause a little bit and remember this journey that we've just kind of been on. No matter that, so again, we focus more around slow thinking, slow system thinking, and it very much talks about those bigger decisions that require information, require help, advice gathering. The step that we should take is first, we take a deep breath, we pray for guidance. We then gather the facts, internal and external. We then have the courage and the humility to ask for advice. Don't forget that step. Learn from others. Don't always make the same mistake yourself. Have to learn through your mistakes in 100% of the time. Calculate the costs. Remember, you can't get reclaim time. It's not an option, unfortunately. Prepare for problems, not trying to solve them, but prepare, knowing that things will come up. Remember Mother Teresa. And then finally, it's face your fears and jump in. Where you fall short, rely on faith, and we rely on Romans 8:31. If God is for us, who can be against us? So before I kind of open up for questions, let's have a little bit of a discussion about it. I talked about it a little bit at the beginning. Avoid letting decision-making consume you. Don't sweat the small stuff, as we discussed, right? Just get the cappuccino. You shouldn't let the queue, literally have a queue built up behind you because you can't work out what you want for your coffee. Get comfortable with uncertainty. We know that means talk about relying on faith. And then the last point is lean on your faith and let the Holy Spirit guide you. That's the kind of call it the magic sauce or the special sauce that we sprinkle on the end of every decision. And the bits that we haven't quite been able to if you're a maths person, sorry, like reconcile. It's not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. It's a grey area. So there's a verse that talks about in Corinthians 2:10-11, but God has revealed them to us through his Spirit. For the Spirit searches all things, yes, the deep things of God. For what man knows the things of a man except the spirit of the man which is in him? Even so, no one knows the things of God except the Spirit of God. So kind of link into that Holy Spirit as much as you can. Have it guide you. It's inside of you. And again, see it as almost like your secret weapon in decision making. So, yeah, that's kind of what I had prepared. But I'd love to hear from you. Any questions that you might have, any step you want me to explain through a little bit more, or just a sharing, anything? Not putting you on the spot, but like it's kind of nice to have a discussion about something. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because I fall in it too. I think that from the strategies or the steps, and based on that order, it's kind of like sometimes you've got to get out of your own thoughts. So for me, that's between step 2 and step 3, you've already started gathering everything. So you've kind of got it all. Combine step 3 and step 4 so that you're getting an external perspective or external voice beyond just weighing up the option in your head, because that's what's going to probably contribute to your analysis paralysis. So there's that part. And then I think as well, another important step that we saw only came out in step 4 is, why do you want X that's kind of coming your way? Like if you can link the link to your purpose or the reason why, then you should be able to know, hopefully a little bit more practically, logically, not getting bogged down in the information, how to actually get there. Do you have any other thoughts around that one? Okay. I hope that answered somewhat. He's more experienced in this area than I am. Anyone else? Yeah? Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And so, like an example, when they're trying to do a decision, they are so emotionally invested, it clouds their judgment and being able to make a decision. So, if anybody was to make a decision where you're emotionally invested, how would you advise that they remove the emotion and become more rational?
Yep. And I think that's why I'm grateful there's 6 steps. Step 2 is non-emotional. We're not considering emotion at all. We are only gathering facts. It's only at step 4 that we're allowed to bring in information, logic, and emotion. So I know allowed, based on the actual steps. So I think the simplest way to do it is, if we solely rely on, if we infuse emotion in step 2, we have clouded and pretty much wasted our time between step 3 and step 6. So if as much as you can, keep the emotion to a minimum in step 2. Just do your analyses logically, internal, external, just gather. Once you've got it all, then you can bring in a little bit of emotion to start, as I said, to kind of like cross out some of the options or some of the thinking, and hopefully we'll be able to like better combine emotion and logic than if it was emotion alone or logic alone. Because you do, to make ultimately the best decision, you do need to combine both. Does that help a little bit? Cool. Anyone else, guys? I mean, come on, we make thousands of decisions a day. I hope you all chose cappuccino this morning, by the way. Yeah. Yep. Yep. It's step 4. It comes through there because, yeah, and I think, because I was stewing on that as well, because it's between, like, no, let's not be as black and white. It's not logical. It's, so it actually, if we're true to ourselves, it has to be within praying for guidance at that first step, because remember how we're kind of encouraged to alter the language in our prayer and not say, I want this, because you probably don't know if you want it yet. You haven't done the work. So it's understanding a little bit more of linking to your purpose. Like, what is it that you're trying to achieve? Am I going to get closer to God through this? Am I going to be able to gain an experience that's going to be of benefit to me and my surroundings in my life? You know, unpacking that. Let that prayer for guidance step start to get really deep to your core. Because then we're encouraged within step 4 to actually then say, based on my value system, I've been able to prioritize the options based on what I'm willing to lose time for. Because time is our most valuable commodity. Look at, who am I? You know what I mean? It's the most precious thing that we have, and we lose it if we, you know, so we want to make sure that we're using it to the best that we can. I hope that kind of answers it a little bit more. Bring it into prayer, so that way you kind of take it away from the analysis paralysis up front, honestly. And then you've gotten enough information to then hopefully bring you back to what you were trying to achieve. Like, is it, let's use the job example again. Are you only chasing this promotion because it's going to improve your job title, but everything else that it's going to give you is really probably not beneficial to you? Like, what are you chasing? Prestige, respect, you know, or are you chasing learning, growth, experience, relationships, something a little bit deeper, you know, than the superficial reasons why we might, in that example anyway, with a job, actually make that decision. Any other thoughts? Because that's a hard one. Sure. I think what it comes down to is what the decision is, case by case, right? Because I agree, sometimes if there's as they say, if there's too many fingers in the pie, sometimes that can actually cause analysis paralysis and maybe mixed feedback. So I think the key here is around saying, well, who are those wise people around me that are my go-tos? Who will actually remain level-headed in the situation to help me actually get some clarity, but also share some learning. So I wouldn't necessarily tell everyone every decision that you have to make. But for example, if you're going into a new area of work and you know someone who's very experienced in that field, yeah, it will probably be worth asking them for advice, right? Just to get, again, the objective is there is not to, you don't want to create more noise in your brain, but what you want to do is you want to at least take some learnings to help avoid making mistakes. I think is the key there, yeah, more than anything. Yeah, so it is case by case. I agree. Sometimes that adds hours of but Flan, I said shot of air, and now I don't know. I was on step 2 really well. I gathered all the facts. I knew where I was going. Yeah, and it's not like every Tom, Dick, and Harry. It's selective people who you would want to gain something from. Yeah. Anything else, guys? A little bit more confident, I hope, in making decisions. The interesting part is some people go through these steps, and you know what's really sad? Step 1 is missing. Step 1 is missing. They have 5 steps, is what they teach at university in psychology, or just like business courses. There's no prayer for guidance. It's only logical mixed with your own emotion. There's no opportunity for you to really dig deep and find your purpose and link that to what is the right decision to make. So, you know, prayer for guidance is the most important thing because it grounds you. It really does. So don't lose sight of that. And you know, hopefully through this we've learnt to not make decisions anyway on a whim. Well, we will give it that time, or at least pause, look at this beautiful church. Come into that, go in the altar and just have a bit of quiet time before you go and progress to the next steps. We good? Anything else? Nice. Glory be to God forever. Amen. Thank you, guys.
Really enjoyed that. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. It's very, very nice.